You're having dinner with your sibling. Outside, it's a quiet evening. On the table are the remnants of pasta you cooked together, just like when you were kids. You're laughing, remembering how, at 10 years old, you stole sugar from Grandma and made chocolate from cocoa and water. Everything feels warm. Everything feels alive. Then he says, "Are you still voting for those people?" The air thickens abruptly, as if someone switched off the oxygen. Your smile freezes. Your cheek muscles clench. Your fingers dig into the tablecloth until your knuckles turn white. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't frown. But in his gaze, it's not your brother. In his gaze, it's a tribunal. You are no longer family. You are representatives of hostile armies. Though just a minute ago you were sharing a spoon. Does this moment sound familiar? Here's the paradox. You both believe in honesty, in goodness, in children growing up with truth. Yet, it's this shared morality that's tearing you apart. Politics today isn't just an opinion. It's a test of humanity. And if you fail it in the eyes of a loved one, you haven't just made a mistake. You've become a traitor. Your disagreement isn't a discussion, it's a signal. You're not one of us. And that hurts more than betrayal, because it's not about an action. It's about your DNA. Your beliefs are your DNA. Look at this. It's not you who broke. It's the system. Invisible yet powerful. It operates in your phone, in algorithms, in every like that praises you for hatred. It transforms an idea into an identity and disagreement into betrayal. Remember this moment. According to the Pew Research Center, 58% of Americans in 2023 avoid discussing politics with family members. That's 22 points higher than 7 years ago. 7 years, 2 presidential terms, and millions of ruined dinners. But what if there's a way out? What if you can recognize the point of no return before the tablecloth hits the floor? By the end of this story, you'll understand how ideology became stronger than love, and how to bring back someone you've already mentally buried, while they're still sitting at the same table. Sarah from Ohio poured her coffee. Hot steam rose to the ceiling like a prayer. She picked up her phone, and her fingers froze. Michael had unfriended her. Just like that, without a word, without an argument. Only an empty feed where his photos used to be. From graduation, from his first day at work, from her birthday. All she had written was, "These riots are destroying our city. Not you animals, not all is lost, just worry, like any mother." But for him, it was a verdict. Have you felt that? When your name is erased, not from a chat, but from someone's inner world? In Sarah's dresser drawer are Michael's drawings, yellowed, with the inscription, "To Mom, who saves me from thunderstorms." Now, when she thinks of him, she doesn't see the boy under the blanket. She sees the one on the other side. An enemy, not a son. Here's the trap. Your beliefs are no longer just opinions. They're your moral DNA. Scientists from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology have shown that when an idea merges with a person's identity, an argument turns into an execution. You're not wrong, you're corrupted, morally, forever. Do you know that chill in your chest when a loved one looks at you and doesn't recognize you? And this is where it gets most unsettling. Highly educated people sever ties more often. Why? Because for them, politics isn't about survival. It's a costume, like Hermes or a subscription to The New Yorker. It's a way to tell the world, I am good. And if your mother, brother, or best friend doesn't wear that costume, they're not just disagreeing. They're tarnishing your image, lowering your status. And then it's easier to cut them out than to risk your reputation in front of those who are in the know. Imagine you're in an expensive restaurant. Everyone around you is yours. You say the right things, drink the right wine. And then your father walks in a worn-out jacket, asking, "Why do you hate the police so much?" Everyone is silent. You are silent. Because his presence is a threat to your status. Are your palms sweating? If your identity is your ideology, then disagreement becomes a stab wound. And in a world where everyone lives in their own bubble of likes and affirmations, even a loved one can suddenly find themselves outside that world. Then they cease to be a person. They are noise, an obstacle, an enemy. And all of this doesn't happen in a public square, not on air. It happens in the silence after dinner, when you lie in the dark. And for the first time in 30 years, you can't utter the name of the person you loved most. Remember, when an idea becomes skin, any disagreement feels like a burn. James and Maria from Texas had been together for 17 years. They had 2 children, a house with a white picket fence, and a tradition of making pancakes every Sunday. The smell of maple syrup and the sizzle of the pan were the soundtrack of their love. But one morning, Maria said, "The children need to get vaccinated." James didn't answer immediately. He looked at her, and for the first time in all those years, she saw not love in his eyes, but fear mixed with suspicion, as if she had just let a stranger into their home. Then he said, "You want to hand them over to the system?" Word by word, they were no longer spouses. They were adversaries. A week later, he moved into the guest room. A month later, into a separate apartment. All because of one question: are you for or against? Which no longer concerned vaccines, but only one thing: are you still with me? Does this moment sound familiar? When your kitchen turns into a tribunal? This isn't just a family conflict. It's the result of echo chambers, algorithmic traps, where, according to Meta leaks from 2021, users receive content that amplifies emotional polarization. Social media algorithms show you only what confirms your beliefs. Over time, your normal narrows to a fine line. What once seemed like an acceptable opinion now looks like betrayal. You stop seeing a diversity of opinions. You only see enemies and allies. And when your spouse, friend, or parent expresses a different opinion, they're not just mistaken. They're violating the boundary of the reality you live in, and thereby becoming a traitor even if they don't utter a word. Have you felt this? When your world shrinks to a single post? Internal meta-reports, leaked in 2021, revealed a shocking truth. Facebook and Instagram algorithms intentionally amplify conflict. Because anger holds attention longer than agreement, 64% longer, according to internal metrics. Disagreement is content, and content is profit. So your feed turns into a battlefield, where every disagreement feels like an act of aggression. And you don't even notice how your reality is distorted, until you lose the closest person, whom your pulse once knew, not your profile. Are your palms sweating? Your friends aren't disappearing because you've become a bad person. They're disappearing because you've fallen out of the bubble. And in this bubble, there's no room for doubt, compromise, or gray areas. There's only black and white. And if you're not white, you're black. But this isn't the end. Because when the boundaries of reality shift, even care can become betrayal. And then you don't just lose connection, you lose the right to empathy. Look here, an algorithm is not a neutral servant. It's an invisible amplifier. It takes your pain, your fear, your love, and turns them into fuel for a war you didn't even notice until there was no one left to share pancakes with. Remember this moment. Your feed is not a mirror. It's a trap. And you're already inside. Maria didn't want to control. She was simply afraid. Afraid her children would get sick. That their fever would spike to 104 degrees. That she wouldn't be able to sleep, listening to their ragged breathing. So she told James, "Let's think about vaccination." But he didn't hear care. He heard, "You're incapable of protecting your family. You're blind. You've fallen for propaganda." In his eyes, her suggestion became an act of power, an invasion of his role as father and protector. And her fear, a weakness, a sign that she had given in to the system. He didn't see his wife. He saw an agent of a system that, in his opinion, was destroying freedom. And in that moment, care turned into betrayal. Not in her words, but in his perception. Reshaped by years of algorithmic reinforcement. Do you know this fear? When you speak out of love and you're answered as if you've attacked, this is called norm displacement. In an ideological war, the boundary of acceptable behavior is constantly recalibrated. What was normal yesterday now looks like a compromise with the enemy. Concern for health, children's safety, even expressing empathy. All of this can be reinterpreted as betrayal if it doesn't align with the new moral scale. And the deeper the polarization, the narrower this scale becomes, until only complete agreement fits. Clinical observations by the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy confirm in 2022, 37% of conflicts between spouses began not with personal accusations, but with ideological differences disguised as care. Imagine, you hug your child because they're crying, and your partner steps into a corner and whispers, "You're spoiling him. You're making him weak." Not "I'm tired," not "I'm scared," but an accusation. Because even an embrace is now a political act. During the pandemic, 41% of couples in the U.S. stopped discussing health issues. Not out of indifference, out of fear. Fear that one wrong word would destroy everything. People fell silent, not because they stopped loving. They fell silent because they realized even care can be perceived as a threat. And then it's safer to be silent than to risk it. This phenomenon has been called ideological silence, when silence becomes the only way to preserve the illusion of connection, while the real connection is already broken. Are your palms sweating? You no longer see a person. You see a violation of a norm. And when a person becomes a violation, they can be erased, deleted, forgotten. And this is no longer a conflict. This is preparation for the next stage, when a loved one turns not just into an enemy, but into a symbol of everything you hate. And then their disappearance begins to seem not like a tragedy, but like purification. Look at your messages. How many times have you deleted a line because you were afraid, not of being misunderstood, but of being declared a traitor? Here's the tragedy. You still love, but your love is now under suspicion. Sarah no longer speaks his name aloud. It sticks in her throat like a splinter. When she thinks of Michael, she doesn't recall how, at 7, he fell off his bike and didn't cry for 3 hours, so as not to upset her. No. Now she only sees a crowd, shouting, with placards, with flags, and somewhere within it, a silhouette resembling her son. But it's not him, it's them. And they are a threat. Have you felt this? When the face of a loved one blurs like a photo in the rain, and only a label remains, her brain isn't betraying her. It's protecting itself. To avoid being torn between love and horror, it simplifies. A person is too complex. Ideology is simple. Anti-vaxxer, radical. The mob. A label is like a switch. Click. And the pain disappears. Because you can cry with a person. But with a symbol, you can only fight. Do you know that cold feeling in your chest when you suddenly stop recognizing a loved one? This isn't hatred. It's dehumanization, a psychological escape. The brain, like a chef in a restaurant, removes everything from the menu that causes nausea. Only what can be swallowed without pain remains. And if your brother, mother, or son is a toxic viewpoint, it's easier to erase them than to chew on your own helplessness. Look here. Family therapists in 2024 recorded that 63% of couples now call each other dangerous or toxic, not because of infidelity, not because of shouting, but because one said, "I believe in this," and the other heard, "I will destroy you." The word toxic is no longer about behavior. It's about a boundary, like enemy in a military report. And once you utter it, you give yourself permission to leave. Not because your heart stopped, because you no longer see a heart. You see a threat. Are your palms sweating? Imagine you're looking at an old photo. You and him on the beach. Sun, laughter, ice cream on your chin. But now you're not smiling, you look away. Because you know if you look too long, pain will come. And pain, that means you still believe he's human. But he's no longer human, he's a symbol. And a symbol cannot be embraced. It can only be burned. This is the point of no return. Not when he left. Not when you stopped writing. But when you stopped seeing. When your brain replaced breath with dogma, pulse with slogan, love with threat. And then the break. It's not a tragedy. It's purification. Like pulling out a splinter. Painful, but necessary. Do you still think you're losing a relationship? No. You're losing reality. And in this new reality, there's no room for doubt, forgiveness, memories. There's only black and white. And if he's black, you're obligated to erase him. Not out of malice, out of duty, to yourself, to your moral DNA. Remember this moment. When you stop seeing the person, you've already buried them, even if they are still breathing. Sarah sat at the kitchen table at 3 a.m. Outside, the quiet of suburban Ohio was broken only by the rare rustle of leaves in the wind. On her laptop screen, an empty email field illuminated her tired face. She typed, deleted, typed again. Honey, I don't want to argue. I just want to know you're okay. His face flashed in her memory from the last time they spoke. Not anger, but disappointment. Deep, almost physical, as if she had betrayed not him, but himself. She pressed send. 6 minutes later, a reply. One line burned into her consciousness. You chose the side of violence. Silence hung in the room, thick as tar, and in it, Sarah felt the last bridge to her son collapse. Does this moment sound familiar? When words turn into a verdict? This isn't an argument, it's an execution. Because when your beliefs are your DNA, disagreement isn't an opinion. It's an accusation of moral contamination. Sarah's son didn't read her letter. He read a signal. She's with them. And they aren't people. They're a virus. And the only way not to get infected is to erase them. Completely. Without a trace. Have you felt this? When your I love you sounds like I betray you? And this is where it gets most unsettling. You no longer decide who to be friends with. You perform triage, sorting, a term from military hospitals where doctors decide who to save, who to leave to die. Only now you're the surgeon, and the scalpel is your social media feed. A post about elections? A check? A comment under a video? An interrogation. Silence, suspicion. And if a person doesn't pass, they go into the irreparably damaged category. Not because they're bad, but because they're not pure. 58%. That might be you. According to the Pew Research Center, 58% of Americans in 2023 avoid discussing politics with family members. This isn't just a number. These are empty chairs at Christmas dinner. These are unanswered calls on birthdays. These are children who no longer know their grandmother's name. Are your palms sweating? You don't just lose a person. You lose the right to them, the right to say, "I'm sorry," the right to ask, "Are you alive?" Because in the logic of cultural warfare, love without ideological purity is a betrayal of love itself. And then even tears seem like manipulation. Even silence, agreement with the enemy. Imagine you're standing at a door. Behind it is the one you raised, kissed on the forehead, taught to tie shoelaces. You raise your hand, but you don't knock. Because you know if the door opens, you won't see eyes. You'll see a tribunal. Do you still think this is a choice? No, this is already a consequence. And the point of no return passed not when he left, but when you stopped believing he was a person. Remember this moment when you call a loved one toxic. You're not defending yourself. You've already buried them. James didn't know how to approach her. He couldn't just call. After their last argument about vaccination, Maria had blocked him everywhere on messengers, social media. Even their joint bank account showed a notification of changed access. So, he found a mutual contact, Maria's old friend Linda. "Just tell her I don't want to argue. I want to talk about the kids," he said, gripping the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. Linda delivered the message. A day later, a reply came. Not from Maria personally, through Linda. "He hasn't changed." 3 words. That was it. James sat in his car, the heater blasting, though it was 90 degrees Fahrenheit outside, and thought, what if I wasn't supposed to change? Does this moment sound familiar? When you ask to simply talk, and they respond as if you're demanding surrender. This isn't a misunderstanding. These are 2 worlds speaking the same language. For Maria, care means trusting science. For James, it's protecting freedom of choice. Both are right. Both are sincere. But their realities no longer intersect. Meta's algorithms have been fueling the fire for years. For her, stories of children who died from vaccine refusal. For him, videos about doctors hiding side effects. And now, when he says, "I'm for the children," she hears, "I'm for death." And when she says, "I'm for safety," he hears, "I'm for control." Have you felt this? When every word you say is twisted in someone else's mind? And this is where it gets most unsettling. You try to reconcile, but it's a trap. 72% of reconciliation attempts fail within 48 hours. Why? Because one side almost always sets a condition, change, and then we'll talk. But change here doesn't mean let's find a compromise. It means renounce. Publicly. Completely. Like in medieval penances, where a heretic was forced to kiss the cross before a crowd to prove he was no longer a person, but an obedient instrument. Are your palms sweating? Imagine. You're kneeling, not before God, but before a former friend. And for them to see you as a person again, you must say, "Everything I believed was a lie." But if you say that, you'll die inside. And if you don't, you'll be erased. Look here. We don't want dialogue. We want capitulation. Because to admit, he is kind, but thinks differently, means admitting that our righteousness is fragile. And in a world where every post is a battle for moral survival, fragility is a death sentence, especially if you are highly educated. For you, beliefs are not a shield. They are a mantle. And if your father, wife, or son doesn't wear it, they shame you in front of those who are in the know. Do you still think you can just talk? No. You're already in a tribunal. And the only way out is not to prove your righteousness, but to refuse the trial altogether. Remember this moment. As long as you demand repentance, you are not restoring connection. You are building a scaffold. All of this is no accident. It's a system. 6 mechanisms. 1 chain reaction. First, beliefs become your DNA. Then algorithms trap you in a bubble where every like is a kiss and every argument is a stab. Then care turns into a loyalty test. You stop seeing eyes. You only see labels. A point comes where disagreement equals betrayal. And in the end, even an attempt to talk is shattered by the demand, renounce. 6 steps. And you're no longer at the table. You're on foreign territory. In an empty house that smells only of dust and old pancakes. Does this moment sound familiar? When you count the chairs and realize one is left over. Sarah no longer writes letters. But one morning, as the sun touched the windowsill, she picked up a worn-out notebook. The pen scratched. Ink soaked into the paper. I'm still your mom. Not for him, for herself. She put the sheet in the drawer, closed it. Not as a farewell. As a reminder, love doesn't have to be reciprocated to exist. Sometimes it's a quiet act of resistance against a world that demands purity. Have you felt this? When your silence is the last way to remain human. We think we're fighting for justice, but in reality we're afraid of loneliness in our righteousness. To admit, he is kind, but thinks differently, means being left alone with your own insecurity. And righteousness is like a railing on the edge of a cliff. You hold on to it, even if it cuts your palms. But what if true courage isn't in standing on a barricade, but in staying at the kitchen table? Even when the whole world demands you become a soldier. Are your palms sweating? Research by the American Psychological Association shows those who consider themselves morally righteous are twice as likely to lose loved ones. Not because they are cruel, because their righteousness is fragile. And anyone who doubts it threatens its integrity. Imagine your parent, child, spouse supports something you consider morally unacceptable. Not just disagrees. Supports. Would you maintain a connection with them, yes or no? Write in the comments. Not for us. For yourself. Because this question is already knocking at your door. And one day you too will choose between righteousness and a person, between purity and connection, between war and peace, which begins with one word. Shall we talk? Look here. The world after war does not begin with victory. It begins with a refusal to fight. Remember this moment. When you choose the person, You don't lose righteousness. You reclaim reality. Righteousness or the person?